So it is around here somewhere. Here it is. Huh? G'day. I have pulled this document from a suitcase full of my family's history that I brought over from Adelaide, Australia for digital preservation. Now, when I first looked through this, I thought, oh yeah, you know, maybe 30, 40 years old, nothing too old. But the life it describes goes back well over a century. This is a handwritten biography of my great-grandmother, Irene Ruth Wyles, written by her daughter and my granny, Sheila Wyles. And this is what she looked like.
But I wish I didn't see.
Yeah, I wish you could have met her too. She would have loved you. It's full of stories and details that have brought Nana Wyles to life for me in a way that I could have never imagined. There's something you should know at this point of the story about my family. The Davies have a surprisingly long history with music. Most famously, my grandfather Lloyd Davies, this is him playing here, who was a widely acclaimed violinist and conductor with the South Australian Symphony Orchestra. But there's been many others as well, including my living cousins today and aunties. You guys know who you are. And also my father Clive, who has always had a beautiful voice, who won a late 60s version of Australia's Got Talent, playing his guitar. He even beat Daryl Summers, apparently. Pretty good effort.
I don't need to hold your hand. I don't need.
And so every generation of the Davies family gets thrown into music lessons at a young age. Sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. I sulked through 8 years of piano practice and can't play today.
And I don't need to see your face.
But despite that, I've got this weird connection to music when it comes to my filmmaking work, and that ability's always felt natural and inherent. So I've kind of always had this belief that there is something swirling around in the Davies gene pool when it comes to music. But where does it come from? Will my kids have it? Okay, so grandfather Lloyd was born back in 1909, so we know that the musical ability goes back that far. However, thanks to this biography, we can now trace it back further, and with possibly one of my most favorite stories that I've come across in this suitcase so far. And I hope my Granny Sheila will forgive me for adding a few extra lines to embellish this story a little bit and bring it to life. Right, so we're in Adelaide, late 1800s. Every Sunday evening, a local German band plays their music through the St. Peter's neighbourhood. And every Sunday evening, a little girl hears them coming and follows them. One street, then the next, knowing full well she's earning herself a sound hiding when she gets home. She follows anyway. Everyone always says Irene was mad about music, but she never had the privilege of playing. Until one day, an old German man from the band turns up on her doorstep holding his violin. He looks at the little girl and says, "That child shall play the violin." And he hands her the violin. And that's why you guys need to practice your piano.
Thanks, Nana Wyles.
Oh, and don't forget to subscribe if you do like these stories. It tells YouTube that my channel's worth showing to other people, boosts my ego, and just encourages me to keep sharing these discoveries. Now, thanks to this, I can tell you that that little girl would grow up to become one of the top violinists of her time, and she would perform at the top symphony in the state, which was, of course, the South Australian Symphony Orchestra, where she'd actually meet her future husband, Tom, there as well. And then she had some kids, including my Granny Sheila, and then eventually she put down the violin and devoted herself to her family. But even then, right into old age, she would continue to teach children piano and pass on her skills to the next generation. Okay, so that's all the factual stuff, but there's lots of great little anecdotes in here as well, which to me really helps me get to know her a little bit. When she was a girl, it says she was actually accepted into the famous Adelaide Conservatorium to study violin under a apparently famous instructor called Herr Heinecke. But as Granny writes, Heinecke was a good teacher, but a bit of an old devil, and Nana was scared of him. Once she got Auntie Ruby to put a row of pins around the top of her frock, and when the old boy tried to put his arm around her, he got pricked. Oh, and given that it was just before 1914, start of World War I, really bad time to be a dodgy German. Granny writes, "It was just before 1914 and there was a strong anti-German feeling everywhere. One day, some university boys caught old Heineke, tied him to a chair and painted the Union Jack on his bald head. Of course, he had to go. But unfortunately, it was a bad time to be a nice German in Australia as well." Granny continues, "Everybody thought the war would end in a few months. Friends hurried to enlist so they could get there before it was over. And then the list of those killed began to come through. The Germans who lived and settled in South Australia were in a terrible position. Many of them had cousins and friends in Germany. They didn't want to fight, but they were ostracized. And this I didn't know either. Some were interned because they were suspected of working for the enemy. The war dragged on. The bitterness got more bitter." Now, that obviously isn't about Nana Wyles, but that is a fantastic little nugget of history. It sent me on a little bit of a rabbit hole, and sure enough, Adelaide did have an internment camp for the first 2 years of the war, and it was brutal conditions. The Germans were sleeping in like makeshift tents, like no housing. And if you know the weather around, there was actually near Port Adelaide, it's horrendously hot in summer. So terrible conditions, and that's why it was eventually shut down. All of this, by the way, is completely new to myself and my family. We haven't actually read this before. But are these old stories still relevant? Like, should we even care about this? Does it impact our life in any way? Well, maybe not. However, there are some traditions that I'm finding revealed in this biography that, weirdly, a century on, still carry through today. This is a little snapshot of my family's life before World War I. Before the war, they used to have tennis parties. Friends stayed to tea, and afterwards they would all gather round the piano and sing. All the old ballads and love songs and musical comedies, all of which Nana taught me later. There is something that still passes down from generation to generation.
You certainly bought a high setting.
So yeah, I do think Nana Wyles' story is still relevant to our family. And I've started telling this to my children as well. There is something in our family that's a little bit musical, and like how cool for them that they can at least feel like this is the start of it. This is the origin story of the Davies musical talent, maybe. If you're lucky enough to have older relatives still around, go and ask them about their lives. Don't worry about the headlines, get the stories. What's their earliest memory? Can they remember anything about their grandparents or great-grandparents? I've been having amazing conversations with my family while going through these amazing artifacts that's in this suitcase. And I have to say, I would love to hear that this video inspired someone to do the same. Don't wait for a suitcase to show up, pick up the phone.
You are everything to me.
Anyway, there's more in this suitcase to get through. I'll see you in the next one.